So now that we understand the basics of API, how it's structured, JSON, and took a look at OpenAI's docs, let's actually get into our bubble editor and see what we can do now that we know how this stuff kind of works. So the first thing I actually want to do is go over to OpenAI's docs and show you exactly what we're going to be doing. Now, what we're going to be building is actually a conversational chatbot. Now, in previous lessons or in other modules, we went over how to do a one or single shot prompt, which means you send it a message, it returns a response, but that is it. There's no conversation, there's no context. It doesn't know what you sent prior. So you can't say something like, hey, my favorite color is red, and then it's like, great, I know your favorite color. And then you ask it again, it's not gonna know. It's gonna ask you to provide more context. So for example, if you ask what the weather is like and it tells you, and then you say, could you tell me a little bit more? It won't know because it doesn't have context. And that's what we're gonna solve in this tutorial. So let's get into it. Let's go over to OpenAI's docs, and we're gonna go over to text generation, scroll down, and we're actually gonna be using the chat completions API. Now, when you look at this, here is our JSON that we're familiar with now. We have our model is GPT 3.5 Turbo as the default. We'll be able to change this later. Then we have our messages, and then we have those key value pairs. So the role is the system, or the system is the role. The content is you are a helpful assistant. And then the next object within this object is the key value pair for the user. So we have the user, and then we have their content, and then we have the assistant. So remember, when we're looking at this, the system is giving it the prompt or the instruction on how to behave. So for instance, here it says, you are a helpful assistant. And then the user puts in their question or whatever they want to write and says, who won the World Series in 2020? It then returns the answer. And then the user follows up with another question saying, where was it played? And the reason it's going to be able to reference that and act as a context for later messages is because it's all stored within that array. And OpenAI is scanning through that array, looking for other context via similarity search, and then they're returning the best result they can based on the information in that array. So let's actually see how we can implement this into Bubble and how we can actually have a conversation like we're in ChatGPT. Now, of course, we want to copy this curl command, and we can just come up here to the top right and copy, but we're going to be changing this actually quite a bit. So let's go to Bubble. The first thing we want to do is come over to our plugins, we will add our new plugin. So go ahead and install your API connector if you haven't already. We'll close out of that and just start building our API. So we're gonna add another API. We'll call this OpenAI. And for authentication type, we're actually gonna be selecting our private key and header. And then you'll notice that the key name is authorization. Then for the key value, just go ahead and copy and paste your API key in here. But don't forget, of course, to have bearer. So bearer space your API key from OpenAI. And then you should be good to go. You can also add it in the development key value pair. So you have that there as well. So for the key, just go ahead and type in content type. And then for the value, we'll just go ahead and type in application/JSON. And then that's it for setting up our shared headers. We're gonna go ahead into the API call itself, start configuring that. Now let's go back, make sure we copied that curl command. We'll come back over and paste it in. So you see this import another call from curl. Let's go ahead and select that. We're gonna just go paste that in like so. And you see it actually copied the headers over again. We don't actually need those. Let's go ahead and delete both those key value pairs and make sure we change this to something we're gonna know what it is. So let's say chat completion endpoint. Let's label it chat completion. We're gonna be using this as an action. The data type will be JSON, and we can leave the rest as is. If we come down here to our body JSON, we're actually going to be deleting, well, this whole thing and just redoing it. This is not dynamic, and we need to make a lot of changes for this to be able to work in our Bubble app. So let's just go ahead and delete this. So let's start off with those curly braces. We'll just open and close right away so we don't forget. And let's start structuring our JSON. So the first thing we'll have is our model. So we'll just go ahead and put our quotations, call it model with our colons. And then you can just simply put in your variable here, because this is going to be dynamic. Don't just hard code out or type out GPT 3.5 Turbo or whatever you're going to use. Let's make sure we do everything dynamically. Again, we're going to want quotations around this. And at the very end, of course, this will be our key value pair. And then you want to have a comma, and then we'll go to the next line. So we'll put our quotes. The next thing we're going to be looking for is actually our messages. So we're going to type message is, and then our quote, colon, and then another dynamic variable. Now, in this case, it's actually going to be a list or an array of messages. So we need to structure this as an array. So we'll just say something like list of messages. And then we just close that off. So close off the dynamic variable, close off the array, and then you're going to put a comma, and then you'll be able to good to go on that array. You'll be able to store a ton of messages in there, and they will all be formatted correctly so long as you copied this exactly. Now let's go ahead and add our next key value pair, which is going to be our number of max tokens. So for this, we'll just say something like max tokens. We'll close off the quotation, put our colon, and then we'll have our dynamic variable. In this case, it'll just be max underscore tokens. And the next thing we're going to have is our temperature, which means how creative is the AI going to be. The higher the number, the more creative your responses will be. But the lower the number, the more direct and fine-tuned it will be to the data you're entering. So it's not going to be creative. It's going to basically do exactly what you tell it, and not go off on any random tangents or anything like that. So typically, I like to have a 0.5, somewhere in that range, just to give it a little bit of creativity, because if you give it none, well, what's the point of AI? So let's go ahead and add a temperature here. We'll just close that off, add our colons, and then again, our variable, we can just call it temperature. Remember, you can call these whatever you like, so long as you know what they mean, and somebody else is going to know what they mean in case they're working on it with you. Let's go down, and the next thing we're going to have is simply our n value. Then we'll have our colon, and then, of course, the dynamic variable. And that is actually our completed JSON body. Now we just need to fill in these values. If you don't know what n is, that is just the number of completions that's going to be generated. We're going to want that as 1. So let's just do that right away before we forget. We'll have a 1 here. For the temperature, again, we could do something like 0.5. Max tokens, you can play with this. It's going to depend on your application, of course. For this example, let's just do something like 300. List of messages and model. So let's do model first. Model, we're going to be doing 3.5 turbo. Just make sure you come and copy exactly how it is displayed here. Otherwise, it will not work. If you want to use another model, again, you can scroll up to where they have models and just use whatever one you'd like. Again, you can go in the more detailed versions and select the model that best suits your needs. Let's come back to our chat completion. And we have 3.5 turbo copied. Let's go ahead and paste that into our model, just like so. And then we have our list of messages. So what are we going to do here? Well, we're going to copy exactly what we just deleted. So let's go back to OpenAI's docs, and you're going to want to actually copy this entire object here. So we'll copy and paste that, come back over to our list of messages, and just go ahead and paste that in there. And then we have everything we need in order to make this work. We can go ahead and initialize our call. Now, one thing is we're not going to want all these private. We're going to want the user to be able to determine some of these. So for instance, list of messages, let's go ahead and unprivate that. We want the user to actually be able to update this accordingly. The rest we can leave the same for now. But again, if you wanted the user to be able to change these, all you would do is simply uncheck all these checkboxes in private, and then you could go into your workflow and dynamically display whatever the user inputs. So let's go ahead and initialize this call. So let's look at this error we just got. It says you exceeded your current quota. Please check your plan and billing details. Now, as of a few weeks ago, OpenAI actually updated their billing and how they handle that. So we need to go and actually add credits to our API key. Previously, you could just have your credit card in there, give it a limit and how much it could spend, and then it would just spend it automatically. Now you actually need to assign it credits in order to use the API. So here we are in our billing settings. You just come to settings on your account, go to billing, and I can just add a credit balance, and then you can select a number you want to add. So I'm going to do that real quick, and I'll be right back. Now, I just added $5, so we should be good to go, and our quota should now not be giving us that error message when we try to initialize that API call. Let's go back, though, and see. Maybe we get another error. Who knows? We're about to initialize the call. Okay, so we just got another error. Let's look at what this one is. Unrecognized request arguments. So when you see unrecognized request arguments, arguments is a key indicator that one of these is incorrect. Right now, obviously, I forgot to add the underscore there for max tokens. And you can see we spelled temperature pretty wrong here. So temperature, let's go ahead and fix that. And let's go ahead and reinitialize, see what happens now. So great. We got our successful API response. And notice how it tells you what everything was returned as. So it gave us an ID as a value of text, the object as text, a created number as number, and then the model as text. Then it goes down here. We have our numbers as the prompt tokens, completion tokens, etc. It's just important to understand that you can go in and change these if you run into any data type issues with Bubble. So just important to keep in mind should you ever run into something like that. And if we do along the way here, we'll definitely cover it. So let's show our raw data. And you can see that we got the response. The 2020 World Series was played Globe Life Field in Arlington, Texas. And then it gave us all of our other information. And now that you understand how API formats are structured in JSON, this should all make sense to you. We have our choices as an array, and then we have multiple objects within that array. So in this first object, we have our index as 0, and then in this object, we have our messages object. So we have message, then its object, and then their key value pairs. And then you just keep going down the JSON, and now you know how to read it. It should make a lot more sense when you're interacting with this data. Let's go ahead and save that response. And then we're just going to go straight into our design, do a basic little UI here, and then go into our workflow. So let's do that. Let's go to our design. And at this point, you probably already know what we're going to use, which is, of course, a repeating group. That's how we would display chat messages. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's drag on a repeating group, and it's a little far apart. I don't know what this is. What is this box? Telling me nothing. Can't get rid of it. Must be a new Bubble update. If you guys, okay. That's good, Bubble. Let's put the background white and make the text white. That's a good call. So I guess we'll ignore that for now. That's new to me. We'll add our number of rows as 8. So you can see the messages will now populate like that. 4 was just a little too much space. Let's give it a type of content. Actually, we can't because we didn't make our database yet. So that is exactly what we're going to go do. Once you have that repeating group up there, let's go make our database. So we'll come into data. We already have our user. The next thing I actually want to do, and the only thing we're really going to add, is our messages. So we need a place to store our messages, the response, the content, and the JSON. So let's do that. We'll have our messages, or we'll just call it message. We'll call it messages. Create, and then in here, we're going to have a role as of type text, so we know who is the user that's submitting it. Is it the user? Is it the response, which will be the assistant? Or is it the prompt, which will be the system? So we'll have a role as text, and then we'll have a JSON, which we're going to cover in a little bit. But for now, you can just have that as text. And then we'll have our message. So we'll just type in message. And for this, it will be, of course, text. So we'll go ahead and create that. And then we need to establish that connection back to our user. So we need to store the list of messages that user is then creating. So a user is going to have multiple messages, right? And we need to display all those, and we're going to store those list of messages per user. And that's how we're going to be getting that data. So in our user, all we do is select create a new field again. We'll call this message is, and then we'll have a field type as messages. And of course, this will be a list, so make sure you select that list. Then you can see it's a list of messages. That's just how we named everything, so it's going to come out a little weird. But nonetheless, you'll have a list of messages within that user, and you're going to see how all this is going to come together in just a second. Might not make a lot of sense right now, but don't worry, it will. Let's go back to our design, and let's tell it what data we're actually going to be displaying. So of course, we have our repeating group, but within it, we're going to need a way to display stuff. Now, before we assign the data that we're going to capture, let's go ahead and add our text box in each group. So let's drag that over. It's going to snap to the top left, so it must be aligned to parent up here. Okay, it's in column. We actually want it to be aligned to parent. Let's just center this instead of aligning it to the top. Great. So that works out nicely. We'll have our text here. Let's go ahead and assign the data type this repeating group is going to take in. So we have appearance. Again, we get this, makes no sense, but whatever, Bubble. All right, type of content. We're actually going to be displaying the messages. So we need to actually do a search for messages. So we'll come into data source, and we're going to do a search for. And then for the type, we'll have messages. And what are we looking for? We're looking for whoever created them. So whatever message this user created, we want to be capturing that data and displaying it. So we need to add a new constraint, and we'll select the created by option. We'll say created by equal to current user. So that's only going to get this user's messages, no one else's. And that's exactly what we want. So we can go ahead and close that, exit out. Now we want to assign a dynamic variable to our text. So what do we do here? Well, we come to insert dynamic variable, and we're going to take the current sales messages message. That way it's going to display an order based on the user's response, the AI's response, et cetera, repeating over and over as long as the conversation goes, or as big as our repeating group is, or that we allow it to be. So let's close this. We're going to need a text box, an input field where we can input our prompt or our question or chat. Then we're going to have a button. So let's go ahead and find our button, drag that on the screen here. Great, so we have our button, and we can actually get straight into the workflow from here. Let's just change this to submit, and let's go to our workflow. So what needs to happen here? Well, we need to actually establish and create a new message. That's going to be the first thing we need to do. Now, this first message is going to be from the user. So the input field we just added will be the first message. We need to create a field or record in our database that captures that info. So let's do that. Let's go to data. Let's create a new thing. The type of thing we're creating is going to be our messages. We're going to add all of the fields. So we have our JSON, our message, and our role. Now for role, this is going to be the user. So you can simply type in user outside of this search, then hit enter, and it should capture the user. This is always going to be user because it's going to be the first thing in the conversation, is that user's entry. For message, it's going to be the input of value A, or whatever you named your input field. So in this case, we have input A, and it's going to be its value, and that is what is going to be the first message. And we want to display that. Again, when you type in ChatGPT, for instance, you type a message, you hit enter, it displays your message you just wrote, then the AI's response, and that's what we're going to do here. Now, for the JSON, this is where it can be a little confusing. We need to go back and look at the documentation. So go back to OpenAI, go to text generation, and what you see here is actually what we need to replicate. So we need to replicate this list of messages you see here. So it needs to be the same structure. We need to say role, and then system or assistant, then the content, and then the role of the user or content. And then each time that a new message is made, we need to add a new piece to this JSON or list of array. So let's go back and explain what I mean a little bit more. So if we come back, we'll go to our JSON, and this is going to equal, we actually are going to copy and paste this. So let's come back and we'll copy and paste our role as the user. So let's copy and paste this JSON object right here. Copy, come over to bubble, just go ahead and paste that in. Okay, so we have this JSON in here now, but we need to dynamically update our content. Right now it's hard-coded, we need to change that. So let's go ahead and delete all this in here, and we're actually going to assign this content as input A's value as well. So let's delete that. We'll come to dynamic data. We'll select input A's value. So when a user enters a message now, it's going to go back in our database. In fact, we can look at this in app data, go to messages. It's going to put that JSON right here. It's going to put the message here. It's going to assign it the role here. And then we're going to be able to keep track of that. And as each new message gets entered into our database, which we're going to capture, both the user and AI, it's going to add on to that JSON. So this JSON object is going to grow and grow and grow and grow so long as the conversation keeps going. That's how it's going to provide context. So again, you kind of have to be creative when thinking about this stuff because we have to update and add to an existing JSON. And you're probably thinking, well, how do we do that and add it in a new record with the previous JSON? Well, I'm going to show you. Let's go to our workflow. And the next action here is we're actually going to be performing the API call. So let's do that. If we click action and we type in chat completion or whatever you named your plugin, we have OpenAI chat completion. And then you see this list of messages right here. So we actually need to change what's going on here. So let's get rid of this because it looks like garbage to me and it probably does to you too. And we want to make it much more simple. So for the dynamic data, in this case, we're actually going to be sending a JSON object. So instead of just sending a prompt to this API, it's expecting a JSON in our list of messages. So we can do that. So since we're storing that JSON in the database, we can simply do a search for it. So instead of doing some complex JSON object here, we can just do a search for the type, we're going to be looking for a message, come back for more, and then we're going to be looking for each item's JSON. Okay, we do that. And then you can come down and you'll notice that we have this join with operator. If you type in just JO, join with will come up. And this is where we're going to be adding something onto that JSON object. And what are we going to be adding? Well, we're simply going to be adding just a comma. Now, why is that? Well, because when we add our next JSON object to this record, we're going to need that comma so our formatting is correct. That way, in the next iteration, you have an object, then the comma, which is correct formatting, then your next object. Hope that makes sense. I know it might be a little confusing, but just bear with me here. Just go ahead and enter a comma there. So we'll have each item's JSON join with a comma. And that is all you're going to do for sending this to ChatGPT. Now, I'll show you a little bit more in the debugger what's happening, but let's just keep moving forward for now. Let's go to the next action. And in the next action, we're going to be capturing the response. So if we come here, we're going to be updating, of course, our message. So we're going to be creating that next record, meaning we're going to create a new thing because we need a new message in that list or array of messages. So in type, we'll have our message again. We're going to add all the fields. Now, in this case, it's going to be a little different with the JSON message and role. For role, we're actually going to be capturing an assistant. So we'll just say assistant and hit enter. For message, it's simply going to be that result of step 2. And then we'll get our choices, first item, and then that message content. And then we're just going to make sure it's trimmed. So go ahead and do that. And that should give us the correct message and the format that we're looking for in order to store it in that JSON object. So for this JSON, it's actually going to be very similar to what we did over here. So let's go back to OpenAI's docs and just simply copy and paste it again. So we don't want to reinvent the wheel here. Let's copy and we'll paste it into JSON. Just like so. Now we have the role assistant, but for content, we actually want the response of that AI. So if we just come in over here and delete what it already has in there for the response and give it our own, let's do that. Let's do insert dynamic data. We'll get the result of step 2. It's going to be the same thing we just did. So choices, first item, message content, and then trimmed. Okay, now you might be thinking, well, what else do we need now? Well, that's pretty much it. We are done. If we go in, start interacting with this, maybe we run into an error, maybe we don't. You should be all good to go and actually have a conversation with context here. So that's very cool. The only thing we need to do is test it. So let's go to preview and see what kind of errors we run into. So we're over here in debug mode, and for now, I'm going to leave that up. So the first thing I'm going to ask is something that I know the next question will need the context for. So what do I mean by that? Well, I could say something like, what is the weather outside? Question mark. And then I say submit. You can see that is what I said. It says, I'm sorry, but I'm an AI assistant. Do not have ability to access to real-time data or weather information. Recommend checking the weather website. Okay. Say, what is a good website? Now, notice I'm not saying what is a good weather website. I'm just saying what is a good website. Now, if it had no context, it would ask me, well, what do you mean? What good website? What does that even mean? But in this case, it should have context. So let's go ahead and submit. You can see this is out of order right now, so we're going to actually go and fix that. So what is a good website? It actually does give us the weather and certain websites for channels, so it knows what I previously asked, meaning it works. We gave it context. It now knows the information to give. All we need to do is fix whatever is going on here with the UI. So you can see here, this overlaid a little bit. Let's go back and fix this. So the first thing I actually want to do to fix what was going on there is come over to our repeating group, and in search for messages, let's go ahead and order them. So we can come down here and sort by. We'll sort by when they were created, and then we'll just do descending, and we'll say yes, and that should organize it better on our UI or front end. So we close that. The next thing is we can make these dynamic sizes, which they are not right now. They should be fixed. So if we come, we see they already have the width and height fixed. We don't want that. So let's change our parent container. Let's give it align to parent. And actually, let's give it a column. And then everything's in order here. So let's actually move this above the button. There we go. We have our input and our submit, our messages. It's still going to look rough, but it'll look a lot better than it just did. So we have that. Now we can change the size of our repeating group, so we won't have it fixed. We'll have this as, say, 500 min. or we can have it 0 since our text fields are in there. The min height is 432. Max height, not defined, so that's good. And here, we need to fix this layout now as well. So we have 508. We can actually leave that or just leave it 0. It does not matter. And then for our min height, it's actually fit height to content. Our min height is 29 pixels. Let's see what this looks like, see if things were fixed. Let's go to preview and see what happened. So you can see here, the information now displays a little better, of course. You would want to fix this eye a lot. We're just bleeding off the page over here. You'd want to move that over, center it, do whatever you need to do for design. This is just to showcase the functionality because we've already learned how to do UI, design, front end. This is just focusing on how to use AI and interact with OpenAI. Now, you can see it's in order. What is the weather outside? I'm sorry. What is a good website? Then it gives you the websites. Now, we could also do this in reverse, which I think would probably look a little bit better. So if we came back and we just change it to ascending, let's come back to our search for messages. And we can just say, instead of descending, we say no. So that means it'll be reversed. Close it, come to preview again, update, and now you can see it switched. So it says, what is the weather outside? Sorry, what is a good website, etc. You could also do things like highlighting these in different colors. So the user would be blue, the assistant would be green, and you already know how to do that. You just have to think creatively on how you would do that. You'd assign a state variable. You could even store the color in the database and retrieve that color, display it on the front end. There's a ton of different ways you can go about doing that. So you just have to think about it. Now, if we were to do something else here, and I want to show you what happens on the back end. If I were to say, what is the best one, and hit submit, I want to actually leave debug mode on. We'll do step by step, and let's submit that. So what happens? Well, the button is clicked. We run next. We create a new message. So it has the JSON here. So we have role user content inputs a value, which is what is the best one. You see our message. We run next. Now you see this big JSON object. So that is what happens when we join with. You can see the very first object we did, or the response is, I'm sorry, I'm the AI assistant. And you can see here, it was based on the content of what is the weather outside. So you can see this is all joining together in one single JSON object. You have the content, which was what is a good website, which was our next question. You have that response from the AI with giving the websites that's good for weather. And then you have the rest of the JSON object, which is the response it just gave, and the answer or message that we just sent it. So it says, what is the best one? And then we joined it with its answer. That is how it's performing the context. If you were to click on this, you can see search for messages, each item's message. Then you can see it in a better view where it says our text 1, our text 2, text 3, and 4. It'll store all of these in one single array. That way it can provide context to the next input by the user. That's how that works. I hope it makes a little bit more sense now that you can visually see this, but I'm sure you probably still might have questions. You just need to play around with it, really look into how this is working, really look into each detail. So if we come to this join with, you can see what's going on here. It's just joining each object together in an array of messages. That's exactly how this is working. Now, if we left that comma out, we'd be getting errors. If you don't put that comma in, it'll be incorrect JSON format, and well, you'll run into a bunch of errors. And so just make sure you have that comma, you have that JSON join with, and then everything should be working correctly. We run next, it creates that new message. So you can come, you see the result of step 2, first item message content. Then you see the best weather website can vary. So it answered our question. You run next, and then it will display, of course, on your front end if you have the repeating group. Now you can also make the repeating group unlimited. So that's probably what you would want to do in a chat feature-based thing. And I'd recommend you do that. Don't have it fixed like this. In fact, if we come back to repeating group, see set fixed number of rows, you wouldn't want that. You would just want to uncheck that. And then if you come and refresh, it would just keep going down and down and down the bigger your message got. So it says, I could just say something like, thank you, and we hit submit, we uncheck step by step, or we don't, and we run next, and we keep going through it. You can see, thank you, you're welcome. If you have any more questions in the future, feel free to ask. So I hope that was helpful in how we could actually set up a chat feature, because previously we did not know. We could only do a prompt, get one response, and that was it. This is how you can actually have the conversation within your Bubble app. So again, hope this was helpful. Look into the details yourself a little bit further. Again, be following along as I'm building. So when you run into issues, you can just reference this. And don't forget, you can always go ask your questions in the community. If you're really, really stuck and Google and some of the forums don't have the answer, go ahead, reach out, and we'll be happy to assist you.